See that recording happen. Once again, everyone, welcome to Better World Day, Sustaining AI and XR. And we are really excited to talk about this topic. And as Todd said, my name is Mark Majors. I'm the Better World co-chair, Better World Day co-chair. And this is our 7th annual event. And very excited to be here. We put this event together because we wanted nonprofits, educators, those that may be too busy in their prospective careers, in their prospective organizations to really focus on cutting edge technology. So we wanted to bring you some of the latest trends that are out there. And that's why Todd and I said, let's join together and let's build this event. So I'm going to turn it over to Todd to introduce himself.
Thank you very much, Mark. So I'm Todd Packer. I'm a co-chair, co-host, co-founder with the awesome Mark Majors of Better World Day. I'm a board member of the 501c3 nonprofit called Workman Circle Educational Center of Ohio. We're a century-old organization, secular Jewish, that is set up to preserve the Yiddish language and culture and promote constructive social change. And with the mission of in Yiddish for Unschönere and bessere Welt, for a better and more beautiful world. As an organization, we were looking at ways to reinvent ourselves to be relevant in the 21st century and beyond, and realized technology was a key aspect of that, both in terms of outreach to younger members and ensuring we have a vital and viable connection to other organizations doing good work. So it was with that in mind that reached out to Mark Majors, president of Leading Hands Through Technology, an incredible resource for families and others to understand trends in technology, and decided what could we do? And we thought, hey, an annual event where we highlight different trends in technology in a way that's we can explain clearly and concisely with experts from technology providers, academic institutions, and others. And that's how we came to this as our 7th annual event this year on sustaining AI and XR for a better world. But I do believe we're getting some help today in the introduction.
Introduce our automated
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Better World Day 2023. We are thrilled to have you here for this virtual gathering focused on sustaining AI and XR for a better world. As we convene from around the globe, we embark on an inspiring journey toward a brighter and more sustainable future. Today, we'll explore the remarkable potential of artificial intelligence and extended reality to create a positive impact on our planet. We will delve into groundbreaking technologies, innovative solutions, and ethical considerations that will shape a better world for all. This event is an opportunity to collaborate, learn, and inspire change. Together, we can harness the power of AI and XR to address pressing global challenges and make the world a better place for future generations. Thank you for joining us on this exciting adventure. Let's pave the way for a more sustainable and inclusive world. Enjoy the event.
Todd, tell us how this came together, this intro.
So yes, as one of your human facilitators today, we wanted to see how we could leverage artificial intelligence. So that was a prompt to ChatGPT set up actually yesterday, and to create that based on asking ChatGPT to create an introduction of 150 words or less to welcome folks to this event today. Shared that with Mark, who ran it through a voice generator AI to create the intro that you had. I do want to say something.
Technology that's out there.
Technology that's out there. Mark, the name of that resource that you were using again?
Sure, it's Natural Reader.
Natural Reader. So this is part of what we are experiencing today. Now, a lot of what we want to do is talk about trends in general, but artificial intelligence and extended reality are here today. One of the concepts that we wanted to frame this around is there's a Yiddish word, heimische, and that means welcoming. So if you have a heimische home, you're very welcoming to family and so forth. And that is sort of an overall philosophy of our approach to technology, especially with technology that has been framed more often as scary and frightening. And AI in particular seems to be artificial intelligence. We hear so many implications and see enough film clips about movies like The Terminator to get our anxiety ratcheted up pretty high. We want to take a different approach. So we've identified our keynote speakers, Yulia and Bill, and our panelists, Asif, Vasu, and Enrico, to help us understand how these technologies can be helpful, can be useful, and can be managed and developed ethically. So individuals, organizations, and collectively all of us can find ways to create a better world using these. And in that sense, create a more heimische approach, as it were, to these technologies.
Yes, and I think as we explore these technologies today, we're very excited. Once again, we wanted to not only thank all of our sponsors, but one of our platinum sponsors here is Kent Displays, and we do have some codes that we are going to give out later today, Todd, that we've been able to be generously donated. So we'll be raffling those off to some of our attendees and thanking our speakers as well.
Excellent.
Anything out to Kent Displays, I did want to play a short video to thank them and really understand their sponsorship. Anything else, Todd, you wanted to add?
We're grateful for everyone joining us today and look forward to great keynote presentation from Yulia and Bill, and then we'll have a brief break and then bring everyone back for our panel discussion. Feel free to drop questions into the Q&A.
We'll go over the program in a moment. All right, here we go.
There's comfort in the rhythm that's created between our hand and eye while we write. Something that can't be replaced by the mild swipe of a finger or the hammering of our thumbs. No, this is like a dance. A dance that's paved the way for millions upon millions of ideas to come to fruition. And though some of what we write may have more impact than others, it's always the thought that counts.
Once again, wanted to thank our sponsor. And as Todd had said, we are going to be, jumping into our overview of our program here in a moment. Also wanted to thank Accenture for all of their help, but we wanted once again to welcome you. We're going to be going over to our presentation here in a moment with our keynote. Then after that, we will take a quick moment to get settled and then get into our panel presentation. We do have questions that we have prepared for our panel, but we also invite you to drop them into the Q&A, which we will then make sure that we get your question over to our panel. We do want to make it very interactive, so please add as much as possible. We can also promote you so you can then ask your question as well and speak directly with the panel. When we're going through the particular presentation, we just ask you to please drop your questions into Q&A. And then at the end, we'll take a quick moment, see if there's anything else, do a quick summary of what we saw today, and thank everybody for attending. But we are really excited about our presentation today. I know, Todd, there's so much to say about this topic, and we've been excited because this was our first year that we have decided to bring back a similar topic. We did bring in AI this year along with XR, but our mission is just arming nonprofits with this knowledge so that they can apply it and make it a better world. And as we said from the beginning, we've selected a topic every single year. This is our 7th, where we've decided to highlight something very specific that we think is a trend that there needs to be some more knowledge around and some more discussion. So, Todd, Better World Day mission, anything else to add?
Just that we've been excited to bring to you a wide array of experts over the years, and so accordingly, if you're interested to see what we've done over the past few years, please hop over to betterworldday.org, where you can see some information from our previous presentations on topics like big data, user access and user accessibility, and user interface, and human resource management, blockchain, and so forth. And then we'll be posting today's event and other materials on that site in the next few weeks.
Perfect.
Oh, and follow us on LinkedIn, Better World Day.
Yes. And also we said from the beginning, we want to thank all of our supporters and volunteers. We couldn't have done it without you. There's a lot of work that happens behind the scenes to get this event up. And not only bringing in the presenters, but then posting everything that's on social media and getting our program together and all the information that you have probably seen from us. So if you do not see your name up here, we definitely thank you. We want to just extend once again our gratitude and just support over the years. Did once again want to remind everybody we are recording today's event. So as we're going through, if you have any questions, please message the moderator. But once again, we are very excited to present to you our keynote presentation. And Todd, would you mind introducing
Sure.
our keynote presenters today?
So we're doing a co-keynote presentation today with Yulia Barnikova and Bill Myers from Accenture. Yulia's expertise focuses on ethical development of the metaverse, and Bill as well has been developing some really innovative projects in our region on working with nonprofits and applying some of principles and best practices to help them sustain themselves and grow. And combining both ideas from extended reality and the technology around that, and artificial intelligence, and how they work together, and how to develop them with a mindset and framework to achieve good results.
And how about Bill?
And Bill is, what we're excited about Bill is his experience working in the field with nonprofits, applying some of the principles and approaches that he's developed through Accenture on leveraging these technologies to help them deliver on their mission, build their capacity, and make sure that they maintain their relevance as they strive to sustain themselves with funding, donors, volunteers, and serving their clients.
All right, well, if everyone can give a nice big round of applause to our keynote speakers, I'm going to go ahead and give control over to Yulia, and then our presentation will begin here in a moment. Once again, just excited to have you here. I could hear the echoing inside the room of the applause. It's thunderous as you're approaching the stage.
Love it.
Confetti drop. Welcome.
Hello. Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Todd and Mark. We are super excited to be here, and I'm particularly thrilled to be doing this with Bill, who I think just makes the world better each day through everything he does with clients and his colleagues, etc. He's blushing over there, but Bill, I have to start off with something like that.
I figured, Yulia, and the same can be said about you. I feel like the energy that we both bring and passion for this technology is palpable. And I think with our conversations early on with this presentation, we want to be able to transfer that to you, not only to come up and inspire new ideas and ways to approach the way you think about nonprofit organizations, but let's think about using this technology for good. We see a lot of the headlines in the newspaper and blogs where this tech may not be always used for good. So today, a lot of what Yulia and I speak about will be how do we make the world a better place leveraging AI and XR.
Super. And Todd, thank you for kind of giving an overview of our backgrounds. The only thing I'll add on myself is I kind of I do strategy in terms of like looking at the big picture for clients and kind of working across industries. But I also love to kind of bring the technology down to the personal level and talk about, well, even though you might see these big, activations or projects that companies like Accenture are doing, there are ways that you as a person can kind of start to play around with these technologies. And it's almost imperative to start doing that, in order to kind of keep your skills sharp and be able to really understand what these can bring from, to your organization. So I'm going to show kind of both the big examples here, but sometimes I'll try to translate that to how you can actually get started today with them, oftentimes for free, with your teams and your beneficiaries and your donors. So let's get into it. And by the way, if you all have questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and then we'll do our best to answer. Okay. So first of all, I've kind of broken this into, quote unquote metaverse and then AI. So we'll start with the metaverse aspect. Now, what does that actually entail, and kind of what has been the lead up to where we are today? So, the way that we think about this, these technologies it's really an evolution of the technologies of the past. And back in the 90s, we probably all remember the AOL CDs, AOL Messenger, Ask Jeeves. We were talking about, we call it Internet of Data because you're interfacing with the data, with information within computers. And then moving forward, we then started in the 2000s, starting to add that social element, the people element. We started seeing MySpace, Friendster kind of fizzled out, but of course, Facebook came in, into the market and really changed the game on how we think about connecting with each other, both in the online world and even in the physical world. I remember this came out actually while I was in college, and we started just adding everybody in the class. Like, it doesn't matter if they were your friend, but we were just trying to like collect people back in the day. And then afterwards we started getting a little bit more targeted. But I just remember when it first came out, everyone was trying to just get their numbers up. And then from there, does anybody remember what happened in 2007? That was a huge, huge game changer for the Internet of Things. I'm going to look in the chat. Feel free to just, put your thoughts in the chat. What was a huge technology development in 2007 that kind of took the Internet mobile? There are a few things, but there was one particular event. Now, I'll give you a hint. It's very fruity potential. Think about, maybe something you have in your hand. Okay, looks like people are stumped a little bit, but I will flash it over. So the iPhone came out yes, thank you, James. Applause for James. iPhone was released in 2007, and it allowed us to kind of take all of these, all the information and all of the people that we'd been interfacing with on the go. So now we had a whole host of apps and things that we can take a look at outside of the home. And then we also had, like the Roombas popping up, the smart devices, Nests, etc. I know, Bill, you're big on these kind of things. Actually, I always tell Bill that my husband is super against smart things. So Alexa is banned in our house, unfortunately, but that's why I've been waiting to get GPT voice, because it kind of does the same thing, maybe even better. So I'll just have my own personal little stash there without exposing the family. All right. So then from here, the next evolution, we kind of think about the metaverse continuum, of course, involves XR. So now kind of taking all of that information, people, things on the go with us, and now going into 3D as well. Across the continuum of being able to see digital overlays on your phone, similar to Pokemon Go, to being able to see kind of a completely new worlds, both in virtual reality and also in gaming spaces like Roblox or Fortnite, or even some non-gaming worlds that we'll show you in just a bit. And then, of course, in November, I'm not going to make this a, pop quiz for you, but there was something that came out in November that really changed the game, and that was GPT. So, generative AI had been kind of bubbling up since last year. I mean, AI has been a thing for many decades, but it really exploded. We saw this explode in the client world kind of in November of last year. And now we are able to essentially accelerate the way that we create content, the way that we create the visuals, and really the way that we are able to add value much faster to clients and internal teams as well. So that's kind of an overview of how we think about the continuum here and the XR spectrum as well. And then one of the most interesting stories, about XR, comes from our own onboarding story. Now, when Bill and I were onboarded to Accenture, you get your computer, you get your phone, if you want the company phone, and then you get your headset. So Accenture actually ordered 60,000, now I think it might be more, at the time, 60,000 headsets from Meta. And Bill, if you want to jump in on anything Meta, feel free, as you're the expert there. But essentially, we were able to send those out to our new joiners, and then actually have the opportunity to onboard them, at least in part, in this kind of experience, this kind of 3D experience with avatars, where you could actually have side conversations with people. You could play basketball. You could actually do a little scavenger hunt. So it's a much more dynamic way of doing onboarding than just kind of your straight up Zoom calls or Teams calls. Now, I'll give you a little bit of a taste of what we call the nth floor, which is part of our whole series of spaces that we do onboarding and meetings in. Hopefully this will work.
Welcome everyone to the nth floor.
Well, Paul, I love that you brought us to the cafe. This is beautiful.
Hey, do you guys want a group photo?
So this is the Sophia Antipolis lab. This is the next generation bank. Over here on the farther left.
Welcome to Accenture Virtual Reality. This is Accenture bringing forth the power of human ingenuity and technology.
We've got over 30 locations or centers of excellence across.
I'm going to stop it there because I think you get the idea. But essentially, we have a series of different worlds built in which we do onboarding, we do learning, we do collaboration, just networking events, happy hours. We had a Diwali event last year where they built out a whole space, that was kind of had the Diwali decorations, and they had like even costumes on the avatars that were matching. So we do a lot of work in these kind of spaces because as the world has moved to kind of hybrid work, this is a way to kind of keep ourselves connected. So how does this relate to your world, right? Like this is a big event. Like you all are probably not going to send out 60,000 headsets, to your stakeholders. So I also have a YouTube channel for various technologies, and there's a phrase in the YouTube world, particularly the makeup world, where you kind of dupe, things that are more elaborate or maybe more expensive or more high end, and you kind of get something that's sort of close, but that's a lot more accessible or affordable. So the version that I'll show you here is something that I did with a nonprofit association, and I used a platform called Frame VR, which I'll put in the chat, and you can get up to 8 people there on a free account. So you all, if you want to experiment with something like avatars, put that in the chat. Oh shoot, I put that. Sorry, I put that in just to the hosts. Okay, there we go. If you want to start experimenting with, how does it feel to be in a virtual space with an avatar? How can we have like maybe a virtual happy hour or something like that, or maybe a donor event or something like that? You can do this with this tool called Frame, and I'll show you this team building event that I put together really by myself in terms of like taking taking assets from the members. This was an association that has thought leaders in the communication and presentation industry. So some of these people have books, some of these people have podcasts, etc. I actually took some of those member assets, I turned them into 3D models, and then I brought those things into the space, into this virtual world. And then I held a scavenger hunt where teams were actually competing to find these items in the world. So this is something that you all can do, tomorrow with your teams. You'll just have to, you don't have to do 3D assets. Maybe you do, images or something that you bring in. But it's very easy to do. So here's kind of a more accessible example. That's one of the books of the members.
Once I kind of got the hang of it, it really wasn't that difficult.
Well, it was fun. It was very fun.
I was in the middle of flying around the area and saw Cindy hanging around up top there on the peak and shining beacon. Click on her and away I went.
So I clicked on it and ta-da, there it is.
Stop it there, but you can see that, this is, it does take some work to prep it, but this is something I did basically on a kind of pro bono basis just to help out this association. And it was, I didn't need, massive teams to kind of put it all together. So you all can definitely do something like this for an event or a meeting that you're having with your team. here is now switching back to kind of the Accenture world. One of the things that is oftentimes, when companies come to us and they say, well, how do we get started in this whole space? What we often advise them is to create a space, just create a virtual space. We can help them with that, or they can use their designers, but a space is super helpful because that space can then be reused for all kinds of different use cases. In this particular instance, we actually helped the Computer History Museum recreate their space, and then they were able to bring in customers and visitors as avatars to be able to view the museum. This was the time during the times of lockdown where people couldn't come in, on a physical basis, but this also helped them understand that, hey, we could extend our reach beyond the physical. Like, even after the lockdowns ended, this was still a space that they kept up to allow people to enter freely and be able to see these exhibits. So I'm going to play that. Oh. Oops, sound.
Entering exhibit. Make software. Change the world.
So I'll pause there, but you can see that, if you depending on how comprehensive you want to go, you can actually get very, very realistic or kind of, very close to what you actually have in a particular space with some of these tools. They actually recreated the space, they recreated the posters, they recreated the exhibits. They actually made some of them interactive, which was a little bit more than they had in the real world. So definitely something to think about, like what might be a space that could be a space that you could repurpose for different types of activities going forward. Or maybe is there, yeah.
Hey, it's Mark over here in the control room.
Hello.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
Wanted to know if you wanted to answer a question. We do have a attendee that has their hand up, or if you wanted to wait to the end.
Why don't you hit me up right now? Let's do it.
So if you see Stuart there, you should be able to click on him and open up his microphone if you'd like. I think you just right click on his name and let him go.
All right, I am looking for Stuart. Okay. Sure. All right, here we go. Allow to talk. Ooh, I got the power.
All right, there you go, Stuart.
There you go. I just wondered, you put this together for this museum, which obviously made sense because it was a computer museum. How long did it take? Because obviously this is a lot of detail in here. And are there like standard pieces that you were able to pull together, or is this taken from photographs, or I guess the development process and the time frame for building something this elaborate? Thank you.
Sure. No, that's a great question. This one, I'm not exactly sure the exact timeline of this, but typically projects like this take anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks to put together. We usually have a team of designers. We get images that clients send us. Like right now, we're actually working with a hotel to recreate their lobby. So we're, getting them to shoot video of the lobby and like send us as many photos as possible. So once you kind of have the photos, it's pretty fairly straightforward for for designers.
A quicker time frame than I would have thought. That's great. 12 weeks. And then what's the cost associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to give pricing on a on kind of on the fly like this, but
ballpark, yes.
I mean, it is like it's generally several $100,000 for something like a POC like this, but as I mentioned, like you can kind of start to experiment for with platforms like Frame, where, it doesn't have to be an exact recreation of your space, but it could, you could start to kind of put imagery on the walls and all that kind of stuff as well.
Thank you
So
very much.
sure. Awesome. Any other questions, hit me up. And hey, even though pricing is not something, we, typically discuss, like hit me up with anything. I'll try my best. Okay. So let's keep moving. So I want to make sure I pass the baton to Bill as well. Here's another quick example before I get into a couple of AI examples as well. One of the things, I mentioned Pokemon Go before. One of the use cases that's kind of becoming really hot for us is these virtual scavenger hunts of like basically placing certain items into the real world and having people actually go out and find them and collect them in their wallet. And this is where the kind of the blockchain connection comes in, because you are, you're actually like saving it onto a wallet that has a blockchain component in it. So this was an activation that we did with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and essentially they were having a conference for their stakeholders at a Disney resort, and they wanted to kind of get them engaged with Wish Kid content, kind of get them engaged with like the beneficiaries. And what we did is we took art from Wish Kids, and then we basically NFT'd it. We created digital artwork that we hid around the property, and people had to go around and find it for points. And so this was just, there wasn't like necessarily an a very strict ROI associated with it, because it was it was it's not like they were trying to get more donations along the way, but it was a way to get donors really excited and just really engaged with the content. Here are some metrics in terms of what came out of the experience. We had an 80% registration within the first 20 minutes of going live. So as soon as it was presented at the conference to say, hey, download this app, go out and hunt, 80% of the people immediately did it and started hunting. This was, the collection rate, pretty much all of the tokens, all of the pieces of art were actually collected. And this massively increased engagement with participants. It was basically the one of the key moments in the entire conference. I think somebody even said it kind of stole the show at the conference as well. So again, this is like a kind of a bigger, it takes a lot to activate this, but think about like, how can you create scavenger type experiences within donor events, stakeholder events. There are apps now, like I'm going to put this in the chat, like iJack. It's one of my favorite apps. iJack, with like you can actually create a poster that has augmented reality pieces to it. So it's something that you scan with your phone, and then things pop out, and it's a free app that you can start playing around with. So even if you're not doing a scavenger hunt quite like this, you can actually start to engage people with certain pieces of content on the fly in person. So definitely check that out as well. But you can see that the spectrum of XR and what you can do with it is incredible. I am going to just mention this briefly, since I don't want to take up more of, don't want to take up Bill's time, but another way of using VR kind of in a way that captivates people is VR is kind of an empathy machine, right? You are able to step into the shoes of certain people. And one of our most ROI creating example is learning. Now, I'm not going to play the whole video, but we have this, we work with a production studio to create. I'm just gonna.
This is a story about.
See if I can
stick with 36.
Basically, we have for childcare workers, enabling social workers to actually see what a social care visit is like and be able to actually learn through scenario-based learning, being in the space, being like really emotional with the people who are there. That actually massively reduced, I think by 30%, the attrition, because what we saw is that social workers were leaving quickly because they felt like they weren't prepared for what they actually encountered on the job. So tools like this enable you to kind of experience what you're going to see before you actually go there. So kind of in your world, think about how can you use like even something like 360 video, which you can film with like an Insta360 camera. How can you be able to like transport people into a particular vision of the future, whether that's something that they're going to be doing at work or something that they'll be, that a vision for a particular, thing that you're asking donations for. Bill's actually going to talk about something like that. But just to kind of open up your mind that VR kind of transports you into new worlds as well. I am going to actually stop it here because I want to make sure that Bill has a chance to kind of cover his work. But the last thing I'll say is on the AI front, we are seeing a lot of essentially visual bots where it's something human-like or character-like that is talking to people that is powered by GPT. And that is, I think we're going to start seeing that on a lot of websites. That's almost going to become table stakes for the future. So that's a huge trend that we're seeing, as well as content acceleration, which Bill will talk about. So Bill, over to you. Baton officially passed.
Thanks, Yulia, and hello, everyone. So I'm going to pull up this presentation here. Share it. Great. Okay, so Yulia covered a lot of information, and what I would like to go through today is more like practical application of how I have been able to share XR technology with people, specifically nonprofit organizations. So what you're about to see is a deep dive into my story and how, especially in Northeast Ohio, I know not everyone on this call is from Northeast Ohio, but I've always approached things. I know there's folks here on the call that you got to have like a give back first attitude, right? And what happens is, especially in Northeast Ohio, is if you come out and you're just asking and taking all the time, people hear that and see that, and a reputation starts to be built around that sort of taking aspect. And so for me, I've always led with like, what can I do to help? And that has always opened doors. There's always an adage in the world of entrepreneurship is like, if you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. And that has been truly a great piece of something to file away in my entrepreneurship career that has eventually led me to where I'm at today with Accenture. So with Accenture, it's all about storytelling and building use cases that provide business value to our clients. And so what we have here is you can lift up your phone, pull up the camera app, and scan this QR code. And what we see is sort of lowering that barrier to entry to just play with this technology. And through that level of playfulness, and Yulia has alluded to this in her presentation as well, but that level of playfulness has allowed me to share what I love about this technology with others in new ways, especially in Northeast Ohio. There's even folks on this call that have joined that back in 2015, when I created the first Cleveland and Akron virtual reality meetup groups. They were some of the first stakeholders that showed up to those meetings. There's a lot of community organizers on this call that I'm excited to be able to speak with today and hopefully inspire, what is that next step in your XR journey to lower that barrier to entry and get more people to just play with the tech. So here is how I started. So there's my wife, Grace, and myself. We were in Columbus, Ohio. We didn't know anything about entrepreneurship at the time, other than we had a passion for XR technology. And with that, we did everything that we could to possibly share it with others. And in that case, it was, being able to create a virtual reality arcade. So in 2017, the front door to the XR consultancy that we created was that playfulness factor. So, I would say during the day, we would code experiences for our clients, but nights and weekends, we would open up the arcade and let people just play. And a lot of those conversations that we had with that level of playfulness led to doing real work with real business clients. And so that approach can be a similar approach that I think that nonprofits can take. If you're a nonprofit organization, you're like, I'm intrigued by the power of this technology for storytelling purposes. How do I not only get myself using this technology and playing with it, which I'll get into here in a little bit, but how do I get my stakeholders, my people that I'm serving into this technology and show them something new? Because no one ever forgets their first virtual reality experience, right? Or even that surprise and delight moment when you see an augmented reality thing on your desktop. And if you can share that with someone, they're going to be like, oh, wow, I was at this nonprofit, I was with their executive director, you wouldn't believe what I saw. And, that means something. Now, I feel like that time has a little bit passed in the sense of the novelty has, in my opinion, has sort of worn off. And that level of excitement we see here, back in 2015, Google Cardboard was sort of all the rage. The New York Times was delivering it for free to all of their subscribers. I was delivering it to my customers at the time to give people some really interesting 360 experiences. Because I couldn't give everyone, VR experiences. This is the Oculus DK2 from back in 2014, 2015, running off my old Alienware laptop. These wires and everything, these were the early days, but it was through these newer storytelling techniques, leveraging 360 video technology or the Unity game engine. Those are ways to just get people excited and interesting. And, 360 video in particular is just an excellent way, as Yulia mentioned, to just get in and start to play. The technology itself, the cameras used, are relatively affordable. We're talking sub $500 for some decent quality. And so just being able to play and share and tell stories in new ways. This was the very first sort of development studio concept that I had when we rented our VR arcade space. This group here, these were the original kind of crew that I worked with, and we were developing in the city of Akron, Ohio. There's an old historic road called Howard Street, and jazz musicians would come to our city to perform because Akron, Ohio is actually exactly between New York City and Chicago, distance-wise. And so these major jazz musicians would come to Akron and play and perform, and a lot of that history has been wiped out. So what we wanted to do was bring that history to life. And so we brought some Unity developers together who were just community members. I've got Phil there straight in the middle. That's myself at a younger age. And then, I've got Will there on the right. And we were learning Unity. We were developing and building out this story. And we were using this narrative to help people learn about history in a new way, which leads me to what was done on the Ohio and Erie Canalway. So with the help of the Ohio and Erie Canalway Coalition, this was a less than $15,000 total to pull this off. But we brought history to life on the Towpath Trail. So the goal was, how do we work with the millennial audience? How do we connect with the millennial audience? And that was, in this case, walking up to the boat. You would download an app. Back in 2018, that was essentially how most augmented reality experiences were built. You aim it, once you download the app, at a target image or a trigger, and that sort of metal outline of a boat turns into a fully sort of reproduced digital twin, if you will, reproduction of that boat. And as you walk through it with your phone, little pop-ups would come up to tell you about where the captain slept or where the cargo would go and really draw people in. But on the back end, we were getting all the analytics of how long people were interacting, what parts of the boat they interacted with most. These little moments of analytics helped us build a better experience in the future, not only for that client, but to other clients. So again, earlier days of augmented reality, now this app could be easily built leveraging web-based augmented reality. And what's most exciting though about what I learned from a storytelling capacity here is I'm able to transfer that to, this particular shoot, which was with Medicaid. So we partnered with University Hospitals, Medicaid, and we directed, these 360 empathy generating experiences, like Yulia mentioned, that help move the needle on infant mortality rate. So the more empathy generated by these clinicians for their population helped to, move the needle on mortality rate for folks living in our community, which was a really exciting project that I'd love to dive more into, but for the sake of time, it was just probably some of the most remarkable work that I've had a chance to have a chance to be part of. The last thing that I'll mention in regards to immersive, like 360 experiences, back in 2018, I saw a need to bring 360 technology to hospice centers. Similar to Make-A-Wish, I would go to a hospice center with my colleague, Jessica, who's in the photo holding that banner, and we would go ask for people's last requests before they pass away. So within 24 to 48 hours, we would bring a 360 video to that particular location. Maybe it was a favorite fishing hole, maybe it was a favorite family vacation spot. We would go record that in 360, and then with the caregivers, the patient, and the family members, we would give them all devices simultaneously. I feel like that togetherness, that sort of all going together on the same trip, we would hit the play button, they would experience that and take off the headsets and all feel like they went somewhere together one last time before that patient passed away. So again, leveraging this technology for good. We weren't doing anything earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but we were blending these technologies in ways that, with that rapid turnaround and the ability to make it accessible in a headset and making it sanitary and just easy to use, that was such a critical component to delivering this experience. So, this particular opportunity I had to work on here at Accenture, this was a global nonprofit organization that builds playbooks for cities dealing with natural disasters. So they go to mayors across the globe and they talk to these mayors and they say, if your city has a natural disaster, how are you going to respond? And a lot of the time, these mayors they just don't know what to do. And so this nonprofit helps talk through what are the next steps if your city has a flood, for example. So at the beginning of this experience within the Engage XR virtual reality collaboration platform, that's sort of the avatars that we're seeing here, there was a whiteboarding session before we got started. And I said, all right, so let's take a city. So let's just say Singapore, and or let's take a city. Actually, this was Manila. Singapore is a country. But we took Manila in the Philippines. That's the image you see in the background. And we said, what if this particular part of Manila was flooded? What would it look like? And everyone's like, well, that section hasn't had a flood in years. And I'm like, well, let's use generative AI to see what that would look like. And so we typed it into a prompt and we immediately were able to see visualizations leveraging generative AI. In this case, it was with Midjourney, but there's a multitude of other AI software to start to visualize what this would be. And as a result, this nonprofit is able to generate these stories with these potential mayors, right? To say, okay, now that we've painted this picture, let's work together to figure out how we can solve these issues before they become a thing. So that's bring people together globally, which is the joy of the Engage XR platform, and leveraging generative AI within these platforms. That was an exciting sort of experience for all involved. So how do you, as let's just say a nonprofit, start to play? The two best tools that I've used for augmented reality to play would be Lens Studio. That's kind of the backend, the augmented reality backend for Snapchat. Really powerful tool, very accessible. And what we see with Metaspark Studio, which is the Instagram and Facebook backend for augmented reality, both of these have hundreds of templates to choose from. So if you have a concept you'd like to do, some of these are as simple as changing the colors out, or maybe changing a logo out and deploying it, which can be a matter of hours versus weeks of deployment time. We talked about that experience with the Computer History Museum taking weeks, if not months, to create. Well, these take hours to create, and you could download this after our call today and immediately start playing. So Lens Studio and Metaspark Studio, I would say, are hands down the easiest way for a nonprofit to just get their bearings and start to use their Instagram in new, innovative ways that lead to interesting storytelling techniques for your people that you're serving. Another example is, this is my backyard. I used an app called Polycam, which you can get a free trial for iOS and Android. You can combine that with a Sketchfab. You can download free Sketchfab 3D models. It's an online repository called Sketchfab. I pulled those 3D models into a software called Vectary. And so the combination of the Polycam scan of my backyard with the 3D models from Sketchfab, all sort of aggregated together in the platform like Vectrator. These are all free solutions that I was able to visualize and paint the picture of what I'm attempting to do in my backyard as a result. One of the last use cases I'll share is, I had the opportunity to work with a fundraising opportunity in Florida recently. And so this particular nonprofit has only watercolor paintings of what the next step is for their organization. What does the future hold over the next 5 to 10 years for their capital campaign? And part of that, they were very limited with what they had from a drawing standpoint. I was only given 3 to 4 images like this to build a 3D experience. So I was able to work with a team from Fiverr that I had worked with significantly in the past. So Fiverr is a place from like a gig economy standpoint where you can find and vet, in this case, 3D modelers, where they can go kind of take these 2D images and bring them to life in 3D. And then I can share that image with Kula. And Kula is a hosting platform for 360 technology. And so just from those visualizations, which, with limited sort of resources, especially from an early stage to generate publicity for a concept, we're able to convert that into this 360 image using some talent we found on Fiverr, and then hosting those 360 files on Kula to then share more broadly with the donor base. And we're happy to say that we did this past 2 weeks hit what the goal was for this ask from donors, which I feel like this technology helped to paint that story, which is exciting. So I've thrown a lot at you. Thank you all for bearing with me. And we are right here on time at 10 a.m. Eastern. So thank you all for joining Yulia and I on this absolute rapid fire of how we see these technologies, artificial intelligence and XR, converging for nonprofit organizations to help tell stories and drive value for those that we serve. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much. So at this time, I'd like everyone to please give a nice big round of applause, virtual applause, for Yulia and Bill for their incredible presentation. So many good examples in there. I mean, it's unbelievable how much great work has been done. And I think you brought up some really big clients and also some clients and some nonprofits that are in our own backyard, which makes really a lot of people think about how can we do this? How can we do this ourselves? And how, how is that possible for us to pull that off? So I think for, you, as we think about this topic, we're going to move over to our panel here in a few minutes. We did have a couple comments that were dropped into chat. Just wanted to read them out if you didn't see them. But one participant said, what a beautiful work bringing VR technology to nonprofits around the globe. There are a couple questions that are dropping in here that I'll just read out loud. Shar said, how can we use AI to automate asset generation from images or videos? What new tools are coming out, especially for Unity development? So I'll throw that out to Bill or you, Leo, and before we head over to our panel.
I'm very excited about this, so I'm going to jump in, and Bill, feel free to build on this, because I've been doing a lot of presentations on this, is how can we accelerate world building essentially with AI tools. So there's one tool called Common Sense Machines that allows you, and actually I think I lost access to the chat, and I was trying to give Bill a lot of shout outs in the chat, but it looks like I've been demoted.
You can drop them in the Q&A.
Okay. How is it that it's so great, right? So Common Sense Machines allows you to turn a 2D image into a 3D model. It's kind of like Midjourney with one click, basically. It's not the best quality. I mean, if you have, a professional 3D artist looking at it, they'd probably, find a lot of flaws with it, but it's, for lay people, it's remarkable how much of a good start it gives you. I actually, I'm happy to flash up a slide. I actually have one where there's a lot of examples of 2D to 3D images. There's one, well, Bill, I'll pass it over to you because I know there's one that you're really passionate about that I've been using too, but I think you know which one I'm talking about.
Is this Skybox?
Yes.
Yes. So let me make sure I get. So skybox.blockadelabs.com allows you to go from prompts to 360 Skybox images within seconds. And so that can be used from, a Unity game engine Skybox all the way through, like I mentioned with Kula, where I've seen people, use these Skyboxes to build choose their your own adventure experiences within Kula. So Kula has those home tour capabilities where you can click and it takes you in the next room, click and it pops up maybe some sort of prompt about the home. You can use that same that same prompting to do choose your own adventure games. So tonight, if you wanted to, you could literally just create 10 different Skyboxes and then jump into Kula, or I would prefer Kula. It works so well, but then you can build your own choose your own adventure game within that platform very, very quickly and easily. So I love Skybox.
That's awesome. So I guess from your perspective, there's a lot of applause happening. People saying they love Skybox, and you said the URL for Skybox was once again.
So that would be skybox.blockadelabs.com.
So I'll type that in here. Skybox.blockadelabs.
That's it.
Okay. .com.
Yes, I'm warning you, it's a rabbit hole. So,
okay, well, I know you had mentioned this earlier when we had our pre-call that all of this is a rabbit hole, which
it's all a rabbit hole.
Pretty much anything nowadays. I don't care what it is technology-wise, because you need to stay up on the latest and greatest. So whether as soon as you go in, there's no looking back because everything changes. What was that Weird Al song? What kind of chip you got in there, or Dorito? Because it's like the moment you purchase something, it's already obsolete. So it's all about the Pentiums, I believe was the song back in the day. So yeah, so I'm very excited here. It looks like we may have a hand up out there. Trying to see who has the hand up. Looks like, one of our panelists.
Right,
all right, Vasu, go ahead.
I thought the presentation was just fantastic. Really, I'm just totally blown away. So congratulations, first of all. I have a question for you regarding this, I mean, you're in some sense preaching to the choir because we're all enthusiastic about this. However, I have an interest in change management. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I have a personal interest in the subject of change management. So I'd like to know your opinions about what are the kinds of things that people say, how do they resist these kinds of initiatives and how do you handle them, whether it's Accenture or elsewhere? Just a couple of suggestions how you must have done this. I'm assuming it might have happened.
I have thoughts. Bill, you want to go?
All you, Yulia.
So I actually, before Accenture, I used to run the digital innovation practice for a consultancy, and there were like one of our basically mandates was to get leaders, essentially change management and mindset shifts for leaders in order to be able to embrace new technology, and not just embrace, but like actually cascade it down through the organization to make digital transformation happen. Right. So I have a lot of passion for the change management piece. I would say the biggest, I would say a few things. One is you have to find tangible ROI. Ideally, there's some people who resonate a lot with that. Like I'm just working, for example, with a financial advisor or financial services client that has financial advisors as clients, and they want to be able to speak with them, right? They want to create meetings with them so that they can kind of talk to them about their services, et cetera. And they have found that it's really hard to get a meeting with them. Like they just keep like getting brushed off, et cetera. But they were able to kind of corner or wrangle some of them into a VR meeting. And they found that once you get people into, those kind of avatar based meetings, they actually get so engaged and excited. They actually stay like a lot longer. They actually had to start kicking them out. Like, okay, your time is over, so it's kind of like you have to figure out like, what are the pain points and how can these technologies solve those pain points? Because of course now that's a really good case study to leadership to say, well, if you could have X amount more time with your clients talking to them, like how, what is that worth to you? So that, starts to kind of build that business case. Another thing is to find kind of champions within, I mean, this is like, culture change 101 too. Is like it's a similar thing, is like finding culture champions or technology champions within the business, ideally who are very influential. So if you can find that intersection of somebody who is can get behind this kind of technology and also has a lot of influence, then they can then be kind of your promoters. You almost like put them out there to talk about this and to sort of sell it within the organization. So that's another way is to kind of find those champions and kind of band them together and see how you can get synergies across. So those are two ways. I'm going to pass it over to Bill because I know you've been working very deeply with people on this too.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. I mean, for me, it's realizing that that the people we serve or the folks in our organization, they're not all going to be on the same page with this technology. We all have our own backgrounds and comfort levels with this tech. So making sure that the details matter, right? And so I say details matter, like I'll give one use case. If I'm going to be meeting with people leveraging this technology, and it may be like joining me in a virtual collaboration platform like Engage that I mentioned, how do I set up those moments for success? And to me, that's having enablement sessions. So it's carving out a half hour ahead of that meeting a couple days before that just get people, like from an open door session standpoint, get people to show up, say, hey, Bill, like I can't, like things aren't logging in properly, or I can't get my headset to like fit right. So to set those moments up for success with stakeholders, those little details go a long way when you're trying to implement something. So I know that's a very tactical sort of answer, but especially in these earlier days with this technology, you have to be kind to people for their first experiences and be able to meet them where they're at so that change can actually happen and someone doesn't get soured on this technology because the interpupillary distance on a headset was not set properly, and all of a sudden they feel very nauseous, and that was the decision maker for this entire project. So those details matter.
Absolutely. I mean,
Thank
just
you so much.
following up with that, sorry, just one more build on that. That experience makes a huge difference, because a lot of times people are coming in, and this is, we see this a lot, is people come in with a few different, biases, or maybe, like preconceived notions. They think, okay, well, I'm not a gamer, I'm not a tech savvy person, therefore this is going to be hard for me. This is like not my thing. This is like for, our up and coming new joiners, or, or something like that. They have these preconceived notions, and the minute that something goes wrong, or like they can't log in properly, or like they don't know where to click, they just confirm those pre-existing beliefs, and they're like, aha, that's what I thought. Like, this is not for me. I just can't do this,
Right.
And so, like, to Bill's point, if you kind of make that process like as smooth as possible, like you're not going to eliminate 100% of the issues, but if you can eliminate 90% of the issues, then that just helps kind of carry people along much easier.
So Yulia and Bill, I know we're right at the end of your keynote presentation. We did want to flip over to our panel discussion. We are starting to head down some panel discussion questions. So I love this. I want to build off this energy and bring y'all, keep you on the stage, and then bring rest of the panel out to the stage. So we're going to do that now. We're going to do it live. So I'm going to turn the introductions over to Mr. Todd Packer, but we wanted to once again thank our keynote speakers, Eula and Bill, and then I'm turning it over to Todd. Todd, you are on the microphone.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mark. Well, again, it just reinforces what an honor it is for us to be here. Fantastic keynote, Yulia and Bill. Thanks so much for a wide array of applications of AI and XR to some really powerfully impactful work locally in our region and across the planet. You both do excellent work, and we're so grateful that you're here to share that with us. So we are super excited that you're going to be joining our panel conversation. And attendees, gear up your questions, drop them in the Q&A. We're about to rev this up even further with some amazing insights. So just briefly, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Vasudev Vasumurthy. Vasu is joining us from India, an author, management consultant, and musician based in Bangalore. He was formerly chairperson of the Association of Proposal Management Professionals chapter in India, and he's contributed numerous articles to their journal on leadership, the metaverse, and so much more. Over the past several months, his interests have been in the area of applying artificial intelligence to sales, project management, proposal development, and so much more. We also have Professor Enrico Gandolfi from Kent State University. Enrico is Associate Professor of Educational Technology at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. Research interests including games, simulations for learning, extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality in education, public schools, K through 12 and higher ed, and online communities of inquiry. He authors several journal articles for the Journal of Technology and Teacher Education, New Media and Society, and others, and book chapters. And he has been a co-principal investigator and senior personnel for grants funded by the National Science Foundation and the National Endowment for Humanities in this space. And he is associate editor for the International Journal Gaming and Computer Mediated Simulations and the Journal of Interactive Learning Research. Enrico has had a lot of experience developing extended reality and leveraging artificial intelligence for education in Northeast Ohio and again around the world. And finally, our additional panelist is Asif Haider. Asif is a distinguished expert in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and cybersecurity, renowned for his role as a trusted advisor. He's a multifaceted skill set, providing organizations with invaluable insights and direction, enabling them to harness the potential of AI. while safeguarding against cybersecurity threats. So ASIF combines the AI and XR components with the understanding of the importance of cybersecurity. In particular, he has been selected as a beta tester for the TIA Data Science Certification, which is a program centered on vendor-neutral AI and machine learning solutions. ASIF's dedication to advancing these fields continues to shape the future of technology and security. ASIF is also owner of Kufa, a service-disabled veteran-owned small business that focuses on this area and providing training and resources. And he's also had experience applying AI in research for individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's. So I'd like to welcome all our panelists. Thank you so much for participating in today's exciting conversations. And I'll turn it back to you, Mark, to start with some questions to spark some insights and dialogue.
Thank you so much, Todd, for that electric introduction, and welcome everybody to the stage. We do have a lot of questions, so we will be respectful of time. We also want to make sure that if there are questions from our audience, please raise your hand. We can bring you in live as well, or you can type them into our Q&A and we'll bring you aboard. So we do have, obviously, we've got two topics today. We've got XR and we've got AI. Is there a way to cross these things over together? I don't know. Enrico and Todd and I had a conversation the other day that maybe there are a lot of crossover, but we are going to try to focus. We'll go down one topic, we'll go down another topic. Sometimes it will crisscross. We definitely want to have your anticipation of questions and energy in this conversation as well. So I'm going to ask one for all the panelists. I'll start kind of from the left to the right. So I'm going to start with you, Julia. I'll kind of go down. If you have, I'll call your name. If you've got something you want to add, or maybe it's in your wheelhouse, or as they say, ballywick, jump in and please answer the question. So the first one is out here is, we talked about a lot that went in the keynote presentation around affordability. I know there's a question, Julia, how much does this cost? We heard, but the reality is, if you need to set aside budget, typically in the fiscal year, this seems to be some of that budget time if I want to set aside and I want to do this. So since groups face a lot of, nonprofits face a lot of these financial barriers, is there anything in particular related to hardware of XR, what you could suggest as options to ensure that nonprofits and their customers can afford the equipment or find ways to access the equipment in order to explore some of these development solutions that we've been talking about today? So I'll start with you, Julia, and if anyone else wants to jump in, it'll be great.
Sure. I mean, I would say that if you want to just start, I would actually just start with framevr.io, going there without a headset, because you could actually build the whole world. Like when I did the amazing metaverse race, we actually, I don't think anyone was in headset for that. So that was done all on browser, and most of these platforms do have a browser option. So I think it's often a misconception that you have to have a headset in order to get going, and it's kind of an unnecessary barrier. That said, once you're kind of down the line a little bit, I definitely would get a headset, because then you're kind of feeling that immersion, feeling that kind of the empathy machine element of that space, but you don't need that to get started. So
Bill, anything to add to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of different directions I can go with this, but I'm going to think a little outside the box here. So the way I've been talking about the future of this technology, I feel like if anyone has seen the keynote from MetaConnect that happened a couple weeks back, we're seeing the Quest 3 device doubling down on that mixed reality capability. So the ability to be in headset, but see the real world and having 3D objects sort of participate in your real world setting. We're seeing that. And then what was also announced were the next generation, the second generation of the Ray-Ban smart glasses that Meta is producing. And so what we're seeing within the next 2 to 3 years, most likely, is a convergence of both of these technologies. So mixed reality plus a lifestyle device of some sort, like glasses. And so for me, when I think longer term, especially with my clients, or in this case, working with nonprofits to see what the future of storytelling can be and how do we get in front of the people that we serve, I like to go to LensCrafters, for example, and be able to grab a pair of the Ray-Ban Stories smart glasses that have, you know, a video camera, photo camera, and then this next generation has an AI chip proprietary to Meta that, let's just say, for example, you have, I don't know, the logo of your nonprofit in front of you, and you say, hey, Meta, tell me about this organization. And it uses the camera to identify the logo, and it says, well, Better World Day was developed by, you know, blah, 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 blah. And it gives you an auditorial kind of feedback of what you're seeing and identifying. So it is early stage for this sort of head-worn AI plus, you know, camera technology, and there is no heads-up display on these glasses, so they are not augmented reality glasses. But, you know, if you're lucky enough to have health insurance that covers glasses, you can actually go to LensCrafters and use your insurance to pay for these glasses, which is interesting. So that's
interesting. Wow. Yeah, it sounds like once again, it's always changing. There's always something that's available, but it sounds like with all the options out there, there's much direction. And Vasu, do you have anything to add to that? Anything from your perspective that nonprofits should think about?
Not as far as the access points are concerned. I think Julia and Bill have made some great points. I had a separate point about you know, using this to gain the confidence of your stakeholders. Now, one of the projects that I had actually worked with someone in Los Angeles maybe a year ago was came up with something interesting that, you know, people donate. They want to donate to these causes, but they aren't convinced. No, I'm talking about the nonprofit causes, not the technology at the moment. They do want to, you know, do something for some, you know, some situation, but they don't trust the system. They don't believe that the money will be actually used effectively. So therefore, if you could afford if you actually could afford $100 that you'd like to donate to this cause, you actually hold back and donate only 40 or 50 because you're not sure about it. So rather than talk about the access to the technology, I'd say that the case that could be made, you know, to acquire these technologies could be a greater transparency. Maybe that's not an appropriate answer for the question that you actually is comfort to those who want to give, you know, these kinds of platforms to nonprofits. That yes, you know, we will create environments. There will be transparency. You will see the project unfold. You will meet the stakeholders at every point. You will see your money being used effectively and so on. That's the only comment actually I'd like to make.
No, I mean, I think you bring up a good point. You know, if we are talking about dollars, or money. So when that comes in perspective, hardware is just one aspect of it. We talked about that. Well, you don't even need hardware. That's what Yuli was saying. You can just use software to build it. And I think it's important. You know, trust and building that relationship is very important. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I know that does remind me of a conversation that also Enrico we had as well. Do you have anything to add in this? I mean, in the educational space, you know, you talked about grants and getting grants for this, getting the hardware and the technology. What have you seen in this aspect that, you know, trying to, in order to explore, to be able just to start a project like this?
Well, first of all, I absolutely do agree with what has been said. The only, you know, point I really would like to highlight, you know, aside from what I've, you know, all these great points about, you know, access and of course starting even without, you know, a headset, is that there is already a lot of XR content that is already out there, especially working with schools. There are many 360 pictures and videos that can already be kind of experienced even with a flat screen, which I know is not the same. And I completely agree about, you know, at the end of the day, having a headset is absolutely more immersive. But of course, there are some issues in terms of access, in terms of experience itself. So also working with teachers is very interesting to see their first reaction when they are trying a MetaQuest and they are excited, but after 10 minutes, they are completely, they're done. It takes time. So also starting with, you know, with really small, short exposure to this kind of content, I do believe is absolutely crucial, especially to show, you know, proof of concept. And this is not, I mean, my other point, and maybe we're going to discuss this later, is also to think about production. A lot of times we have this feeling indeed that, you know, we need to just consume XR, but also try to find ways to actually then develop XR and especially augmented reality in a way that is accessible, that even if, I don't really have very advanced coding or programming skills, I can still create that kind of content. And right now, at least we're still, in the early stages, but there are some editors, there are some options out there that of course are not as advanced as, the things that like Artful Kit or Unity, but they can allow, especially teachers or even students, kids, to start to play with XR and getting engaged to a point that then they will be open to the next step, which means, of course, going and trying, tools that are way more advanced and they may require coding skills. So also, but already starting with what is already out there is actually pretty a good starting point. It's a very good selling point, especially when we are dealing with, companies or agencies or populations that are not into XR, or they have those, what Julia was saying about all those stereotypes about virtual reality, extended reality. I'm not a gamer. My kids maybe play with that, but I don't think it's usually useful. Related to this, I also do believe that there are a lot of misconceptions about the role of XR. It's not that XR is good by itself. It depends on the how, and a lot of stereotypes and prejudice is really about the how. It's cool, but it's just entertainment. Well, no, it is not. I really did appreciate the point about empathy, about learning. Those are all very important, constructs and goals that XR can really support, and a lot of audiences don't get that yet.
Yeah, I think you bring up some great points, and it's kind of tiptoeing into, how do you sell this to an organization so that they begin utilizing it? And I think you've hit on a lot. I know training and education has been a big one that I know many went down the path of. But I think this empathy is something that, because of the last few years that we working virtually, is something that is much needed. So I definitely have seen a lot of effort focused in that. And I'm glad you brought up also this idea of production, because as they say, time is money. So when we keep talking about there's free editors out there still is time that needs to get involved, whether your organization, if you're going to have a consultant do it, or if you're going to try to do it in-house, you have to make sure you have time for that. And I'm glad you brought that up. I did want to make sure I had Asif jump in and give some background. I know you're coming from artificial intelligence, but I know, Enrico, we talked about this a little bit, but Asif, have you seen anything where that hardware or software or the production of XR is somehow now merging in artificial intelligence into that world? Or is that something that we definitely have a question for you to ask about that? But I wondered if you thought from this, is that something that you're seeing as holding nonprofits back, or educators, or just anyone in general from getting into this arena?
Yeah, I think that adoption is the terminology that I would like to use, and I'm seeing that with a lot of the for-profit businesses. And I don't mean to separate for-profit from nonprofit. Everybody has to provide a service, and that's for-profit and nonprofit, right? So if you look at it from the mapping perspective, what I do is I walk into a solution, walk into a problem and say, like, how do I map this, right? So if you have an input and you have a processing and you have an output being the delivery and input being the service that is being requested, right? So if you think about it from that perspective, what I'm seeing right now is that we are trying to boil the ocean, unlike previous technological revolution, which happened back in 2000s, where websites were coming on board, right? People saw websites sipping in slowly, where AI is coming in really fast. And key panelists discussed the fact that back in 2007 we had iPhone, and 2022 we had ChatGPT. Well, before ChatGPT, AI has been slowly coming up in its roles without really making a lot of ruckus. But all of a sudden, in the last 7 months, you had this flood of adoption that is happening. And what's happening is that because there's a flood, everybody's trying to boil the ocean. And what I would like to say is that if you look at it from the hardware perspective and the software perspective, is that kind of step back and say where it is that I'm providing a service right now. What is that I need to deliver, and how I deliver it? What are the processes in the core that I can look into and say, this is where I implemented AI, not today, but in coming months and years. So one of the solutions that I've been entertaining with is that what the panelists has discussed so far is that these are the technologies, this is how you use it, this is literally ready for you to use for some low cost. Because what used to happen back in the days with websites is that you would spend thousands and thousands of dollars developing a website that is not even that great. But these days, to adopt an AI solution for your performance, be it VR, AR, MR, call it any sort of service that you're providing, you can include AI to it in some extent. And the reason you want to include that is you want to scale that over time. And as I said, boiling the ocean means that you have to go out there and look for what other people have, right? What other people are doing. What you have to look at is internally and say, like, what is my business process and where it is that I can really start with an MVP, the most viable product, and scale that over time. And scaling is the hard challenge because you have to have a long-term vision behind it, right? So as the long-term vision that you have, how do you reverse engineer it to the current day? So be it a hardware that you want to deliver, or be it that software or UX, the user experience that you want to develop, start with data. And that data is what you already have. And that data is what's going to lead you to your AI, machine learning solutions, and machine learning solutions to AR, VR. So lots of things are happening. Like I said, it's boiling the ocean at this point. But to start within your data sets that you already have access to is a great point of start.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. User experiences in my house, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think for user adoption, as you had indicated, we need that first kind of step to really understand how we are going to interact with it, because we're generally a little timid about new technology as just part of being human. And there was a question that was asked, and I wanted to kind of, since we're talking about AI, and we can kind of go from left to right again. But it's like we had a question about, are there any new innovations that AI will aid with XR training? Anything that you've seen in particular?
Well, let me jump on the buzzword soup here, right? Let's
okay.
All the buzzwords in here, because we're using buzzwords like AI, machine learning. Let's throw in blockchain a little bit, right? Okay. Lots of the blockchain hype went into cryptocurrency, which has lost its meaning over time. But to look at the blockchain in a different perspective today, it has matured a lot more than what it was previously, probably back in 2009, 2010s, right? Now it has matured to a point that if you are experiencing AR, VR that has no parameter and anybody and everybody can jump in or monetize from it, you'll have to start looking into the blockchain and say, like, how do we keep our IPs protected? How do we keep our solutions protected? So that way, even if it's accessible by everybody, because we're a nonprofit, nobody should be able to sabotage that. Nobody should be able to access it and create malicious content off of it, right? So you have to have this blockchain solution integrated into the services that you're providing. And another buzzword is the IoT, right? Back in 2000s, that was all people talked about, is IoT, and then they moved into the blockchain. Now it's AI. But what that means is that you have to integrate all of these into your solutions that you want to provide. So if you have IoT hardware that you already have existing, and you're thinking about, oh, I need to buy new hardware actually, well, step back again and think about the IoTs that you already have in place. How do you integrate them, and how do you make use of those IoT devices and increase your security? Let's say, for example, your security does include blockchain in it. And how do you integrate those data so that way you have those data in a single point? And you are creating those AI machine learning solutions for your user experience, be it improving your services or processing of your data.
Yeah, we did. Todd, how many Better World days was that? A couple years ago, we did a whole session on blockchain, and it really is, like you said, cryptocurrency has been diminished, but the power of blockchain can't be ignored. So I'm glad you did bring that up. And since we're on the topic of training and education, Enrico, I mean, from this question regarding innovations with AI and XR training, I know we kind of briefly touched upon this, but from your education perspective, is there anything there you'd like to share that our audience may want to take advantage of?
Well, I do believe that we are really at the early stages. We are actually having a lot of issues because indeed, like AI has been around for a long time indeed, but starting last year, boom, everybody was talking about it. And we're still dealing with really a lot of issues. Right now, it's still the mindset is, let's ban everything, right? It's bad. It's just bad. There is no way that AI can really support, our education, our learning, actually it's the opposite. So, and as everything, it's not black or white, right? There is a gray zone that we really need to focus on and try to actually to explore. So the main challenge at least to me and to us as educators is really to find best practices and ways just to change this mindset. And AI, I think, is just phenomenal. I mean, there is so much potential. We have been using AI, for instance, especially Midjourney, but also ChatGPT can be used in the same way to foster critical thinking. We have been using AI to externalize emotions. So, for instance, with pre-service teachers or future nurses, a lot of times it's very difficult for this kind of learning audiences to see what they're feeling. It's easier to write that down, but still it's not that powerful than seeing Midjourney giving you a very good, representation of your inner thoughts. And that's just the first step. So how can we use this kind of AI-related content to actually foster discussion, conversations, teamwork? So understanding how we can use these outcomes, that are usually kind of the worst thing ever for a lot of educators, right? Oh no, I mean, because they don't have control on it, which is a very common, I think, trait of a lot of educators, right? If I cannot control it, then I am not feeling comfortable in using that. Moreover, if students or my learners can know this more than me or better than me, same kind of reaction. I don't want to deal with it. But actually, even ChatGPT, even thinking about comparisons, trying actually to cheat ChatGPT and asking kids to do so. Or, there are all these kind of different best practices that, are out there that I think a lot of very bright educators are already doing. But we are not there yet. Now, I also there was a school, Skybox was, Bill was referring to. There's actually an interesting example of how AI is mixing with XR. Actually was dealing with it with some teachers last week. So they created a Dr. Zeus word, right? And they were all excited about oh, well, we can use this indeed for storytelling, or we can ask our kids to recreate those kind of environments, but also to judge them. I mean, with AI, the good news is that, you can be a judge. You can really work with AI. And the last thing that I will stop Rambo, I do apologize for that, is that it's a process. Even Midjourney, the first time, you write your prompt, you have one outcome, and then you step by step get better. There are these kind of prompt, engineer prompt designers. This is a role right now. People are getting really rich in being able to do so. But kids can do the same. Teachers can do the same. They can refine their prompts, and in this way, have very meaningful conversations about how AI works. Also what kind of ethical, implications are out there. Also because ChatGPT is not neutral at all. There are biases. There are ways to trick the system. So, and that's very important for critical thinking, especially when you're dealing with, young kids.
Yeah, you're bringing up some great points. I like the fact that you talked about that it's a process, it's a journey, because as a educator or someone that's training, you need to be in the technology to know. You talked about ignoring it, and sure, that's something you could do, but getting involved, getting in there, get your hands on it, understanding what it is, knowing that this is being used, so that you then have some exposure to it, and then knowing that there's different levels, there's an opportunity to grow inside there, and it's not the first first opportunity to use it, and it's going to continue to evolve. I guess for you, and definitely want to get to Yuli and Bill, because I could see that you probably have a lot to talk about this topic, but I wondered if you have anything to add there in regards to this, Vasu, in regards to training or anything that you've seen, best practices around XR, or anything that has artificial intelligence that you'd like to add that other panelists have not.
Well, AI plenty, yes. In fact, we are talking to, I have a consulting business, so we are talking to some mutual fund companies that want to train their folks, to profile their targets better and so on. But there are plenty of cases like that. But in terms of virtual reality, I'm very curious to know from the professor as well. I'm associated with a university, and we are actually thinking about how can we take the university to the metaverse, at least some classes. So I was curious to know if anyone actually has any experience, but we are very seriously looking at conducting some trial classes, to see if that would be an effective mode of instruction. We're excited by it. It sounds very interesting, but are there any pitfalls that we haven't actually seen yet? So maybe Bill and Julia can advise me, on their experience in training in the metaverse. That's where I am. But I am looking at it quite seriously for this particular universe.
Yeah, I think you once again hit on a very poignant discussion point, which is, you're doing consulting, you're building trust again with your constituency, and you're trying to understand the best practices how to use this. And I think we're all navigating that. And there's a lot of opportunity out there. And Bill, Yuli, I know you spoke about this in your keynote. You talked about some training opportunities, and there's been a lot of discussion points along this path, and it kind of close this topic or kind of build upon what we talked about with training. Is there anything else that anyone else should think about if they're going down the training aspect? We talked about the tools, we talked about the hardware, talked about the process, but there's been a lot here that I think there's many educators out there. Even if you're onboarding and you're in human resources, there's training involved there. You're welcoming someone to a company. I think you talked about that empathy side. Is that what companies should be focusing on, or organizations?
So the way I would answer that, there's a couple facets to it. So Vasu alluded to metaversities, bringing universities into the metaverse. And I keep going back to this example, but the Engage XR virtual collaboration platform is sort of the leader in metaversities from a hosting standpoint. And over the past few months, they've been teasing their generative AI capabilities for these synthetic avatars within the platform that, for example, if you were to go to Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin would be there to answer your questions about Liberty Bell, or literally any question, but in the style of Benjamin Franklin. I mean, literally any question it'll answer. So, again, to like Enrico's point, like there's a lot of novelty still to that, how we can find the education application. It's going to take some tweaking. I feel like it's very early stage. There's a lot of opportunity for growth, but I think seeing that demo, or even being in headset and seeing that demo, it's a conversation starter. It gets us to think outside the box on how we can use generative AI to educate and train these models in different capacities. So Yulia, anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So, the sun is shining on my face. I need to move
spotlight
here. So
natural reality, right?
Exactly. It's like that ad, right? That's like experience real reality, and it's like a headset that doesn't have anything in the front. It's like a Google Cardboard with the front cut out. One of my favorite ads. So yeah, one of the thing that I talked about as well for learning is the metrics that come out of it. We see it much more in learning than other elements like marketing and others. The one thing that has also been very kind of hot in the market right now is how do you take complex processes, or maybe not so complex processes, and basically create a learning out of that. So one of our public examples, actually, you can search for, Accenture DaVita Dialysis. We worked with DaVita to actually recreate their dialysis machine. So we created a digital twin of it, and then there were, I believe, something like 40 steps to actually setting up the machine, and we were able to recreate all of those steps in this VR training. And if you look up that study, there are specific metrics that they talk about there. So like, for example, like we were able to save time from trainers to actually to actually like supervise the training. We're able to save machine time of actually having it, be being used for training. People felt much more confident because they were able to kind of get some of that rote memorization of how, like, which step comes next. They were able to do that in the, in the headset versus having to do it on the machine multiple times and failing. So, and that's just, one example from healthcare, but I mean, we're talking about that with like housekeeping training. It doesn't have to be in a headset, could be on a phone. It could be, on glasses, where it's like showing you step-by-step instructions. So anytime where you have complex or maybe not so complex processes or instructions that need to be overlaid on top of something, and hands-free is helpful. That's another place to think about, is how can we digitize that with some of these technologies, and that you can get really good ROI metrics from that, from both training costs, time to readiness, and like even resource saving, because you're not having to set up the physical resources multiple times.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought up this idea of metrics, because you talked about adoption. That's definitely something that can draw people in if you do a small POC, or I think as Asif said, that MVP or that beginning project, because once people can see metrics, then that you're speaking now in terms of business leaders, which allows that change. I see you've had your hand up, Asif. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add some value to what's been discussed here. In a long-term vision, if you look at it from the energy perspective, you will start running into the situations where like we're having water problems that is associated with energy generation. So if you have energy problems that we are facing today, it's only going to increase in size down the road because the cost of energy is going up, right? Just because we have tons of electricity going around the world, especially in the US, doesn't mean we'll always sustain that, right? So there's a lot of solutions coming into the pipeline, but one of the ways VR and AR will be able to contribute is that it will reduce amount of electronics that we have in our household. Specifically going back to what came up in 2007 is an iPhone. How do you use that iPhone to do more than what it does today? And how do you use that Ray-Ban glasses to do more than what it does today? If you had one device that could run as your monitor for your TV, for your laptop, for your phone calls, for just imagine the amount of devices you will remove from your energy grid that is no longer necessary. So removing hardware is a key concept that nonprofit can look into and say, today it might be expensive, but in order for me to have a cheaper, better and faster solution services in say 5-10 years, where if I'm not adapting to AI, machine learning, VR, whatever the solution is today, it might be harder to adopt down the road, right? So these the devices that we will remove from our daily business process is going to be tremendous. It's going to provide some solutions to our energy problems that we might have in the future. But the importance is that there's lots of needs in semiconductor chips world right now. If you pay attention to semiconductor chips, you will see how much of an impact the semiconductor chips will make, right? Because we're advancing towards US coming up with these semiconductor chips that will be highly utilized specifically for edge devices, right? So devices that is able to process the information within your device, so it doesn't have to be necessarily connected to the internet, right? So start thinking about it from that perspective. You no longer have to rely on internet for your hardware. It's not IoT anymore. It's just a thing that works just like it's connected to the internet. So those are some of the things they have to start thinking about as far as hardware goes. And I think that's important for nonprofits to start focusing on those things.
Yeah, you had said that earlier about this whole idea that you have to have that strategy or a long-term vision. So start small, but plan for the long term, and that's hard. A lot of organizations, they're just thinking about today. They're getting by, or they're if I'm a nonprofit or I'm in the educational sector, things do not move as fast as we hope them to move. So, but that plan is crucial. So yeah, I think this is a great topic. I'm going to turn it over to Todd to ask our next question, and then we'll start with Yulia on that question. Todd, passing the mic to you. I think Todd's frozen. That's okay. I will ask the question in Todd's frozen state. So we have a lot of talk that is in regards to ethics. And if you think about this, there's been a lot of discussion, whether it's AI, it's even started trickling over into XR, but I'll just kind of ask this out here and we can go down the panel. But how do we ensure that minority perspectives are sustained? So, as we build AI models, we talked about there could be bias that are in AI models. There's making sure that organizations are protecting the data, making sure they're striving to have those voices that are traditionally unrepresented in groups, and ensuring their perspectives and voices don't disappear in all this sea of data. Is there something that you've tackled, Yulia, that you've seen that can assist organizations, or Bill or Yulia, and we'll kind of move down our panel, that can help sustain that? I know Asif talked about blockchain, but that's more about security. Is there anything to make sure that we keep those voices represented in the mix?
Sure. I mean, I can start. I mean, the kind of the best way to, it's kind of a generic answer, but one of the best ways to kind of help ensure that, that we're accounting for bias and, fairness of different models is to involve a diverse group of people early on in the process, because they will be able to ask the questions that you may not, think of, asking, essentially. So as diverse of a representative team as you can make, and that's diverse in terms of, different definitions of diversity, but really diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives, diversity of, kind of backgrounds and expertise levels, and kind of it really, we just want to shine as many lights on a particular effort as possible. So that's something that we strive to do at Accenture. The other thing that I would say is we have a responsible AI team that is dedicated to every single thing that we take out, or we put out, or that we're working on. There's like a chunk of budget that we have to reserve for that team to actually go through like a lot of testing. They actually specifically test for different biases in the process. So that's one thing. I mean, and then the other piece is, anytime you're introducing, this is where it gets really tricky, right? It's like anytime you're introducing a visual component to, kind of the front end of, let's say, a GPT based model, or like any LLM based model, the visual has to be, representative of what you're trying to do, and has to be, has to work with the situation. So we've had a lot of discussions of that, about that, and, we're, like, I'm working with a project right now where we're putting a character essentially overseas, and we're thinking about how, do we go with like local representation? What's the accent that the character will have? All that kind of stuff. And it's, we're involving brand teams and you know, different kinds of stakeholders in the process to make sure that everyone feels comfortable, or at least, you know, we've kind of made that check. And testing, whatever you build, you got to keep, you know, not just the you know, the initial front end, but you got to test the heck out of it afterwards.
I'm glad you mentioned all those things. Very important. Bill, anything to add to keeping diversity? It's a lot of stuff there you told Yulia that I 100% support.
Yeah, I'll go off of what Yulia mentioned specifically around avatars. I think there are ways, especially in these early days when we're trying to figure out, you know, what is that manifestation of an artificial intelligence. I mean, we're starting to see indications with Microsoft, for example, or a lot of these other tech companies that are using like animations as these AIs. So could it be like a glowing green circle that just sort of bursts as it's talking to you? How does that compare to, like, what is your constituents' reactions to that versus like a humanoid figure? And like Clippy, for example, can Clippy come back from the 90s and be that AI? I know, right? But like, what a perfect way to at least start the conversation around like an AI sort of representation, something that a lot of us are familiar with, is sort of a tongue-in-cheek joke, but at the same time, it kind of breaks down the barriers to entry and it becomes more of a fun experience, if you will. And then as time goes on, like, can we get feedback to better represent what that evolved version of Clippy looks like? So that's again, sort of a tactical answer to this, but I think exploring, you know, going with synthetic humans versus some sort of figure, that's an interesting conversation to have.
Bringing Clippy back. It just made my day. I appreciate that. Vasu, anything to add to that regarding just making sure we're keeping all perspectives in view when we're working with these new technology?
Sure. I might say something just politically not quite right. Every culture is not overly sensitive to these matters. It doesn't mean they're insensitive. It's just that we don't keep talking about it, the diversity point. We don't really go overboard. And this conversation becomes very awkward because, you know, it's like anything we do is to offend someone. And that is really something we need to keep in mind. So I really don't have any great point to make over here, except that, you know, we do talk about it, let's say in our cultures, we do some amount of it, but I don't think we're talking about it endlessly, and we are so you know, sensitive about it. Perhaps we should be, but every culture has its own you know, sine wave of evolution, so to say, in terms of what they think is important to their culture and so on. But having said that, I just want to make a point that I am aware, certainly from a diversity point of view, in terms of applications of let's say AI or virtual reality. There are groups of autistic children that I'm aware of, you know, in our local community here. They don't have access to schools, and the first, I mean, in the sense of you know, proper schools. So from a diversity point of view, if that can be called diversity, I would say certain applications I'm told are allowing them, you know, to go into this world, the metaverse world, so to say, and actually find freedom of expression. And they're able to actually be something that they are not normally, you know. In fact, there's some cases where they're so, because of a variety of reasons, they don't even leave home. The parents don't actually let them go out to a special school because there are no special schools. So in that sense, this kind of technology can actually bring in these folks from the periphery of society into the mainstream, is what I'd like to say. And in fact, I have a couple of friends doing exactly this, trying to use technology to integrate people. So that's my perspective. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think, as you said earlier, there's a lot to kind of unpack with this topic. And I know that it is one that is probably overused, but definitely it's a concern for organizations. And we want to make sure that we're at least giving some little glimmer of insight into that. I do see if you do have your hand up. I was just going to ask Enrico if he had anything to add to this, and then definitely I want Asif to jump in.
Sure. So very quickly, I do believe it's indeed a matter of access, also in terms of creation and production. We also be sure, indeed, like Julio was saying, involving minority and diverse groups in the design and testing process. Yeah, testing is so important, but also in the design development, also making this, especially this population, like being, able to use XR to create XR. This can also be very helpful for kind of changing the narrative. For instance, if, right now I have a doctoral student of mine, and he's doing actually an XR tour about Bangladesh as a way to train our pre-service teachers in having more cultural intelligence. So XR, and I think you were saying this during your keynote speak, it was really a lot of potential in terms of empathy, because you're seeing things from a different perspective, especially in a very immersive way. And a lot of times, we deal with situations where, just thinking about educators and future educators, they're not exposed to those cultures. They sometimes don't, even though they know, they learn, but still, XR can really have a very interesting, potential in this regard. Because if you cannot travel, of course, it's not like really travel for real, but it can give you a lot. So think about access to production and using this XR to kind of change it. And I think these are important points. I also, what Bill was saying about kind of virtual tutors or avatars supporting you is a very exciting front, because sometimes we lack of inclusion in terms of mentoring. So there is right now a new attention towards, okay, how can we use AI? How can we use, these two and XR combined to try to address this issue? Because a lot of times we have students who struggle because maybe they feel that their teachers or their educators are different, or they are not inclusive enough. So how can we usually try to think about this technology? Once again, nobody wants to replace teachers at all. Nobody wants to replace coaches and tutors. That's not the point. But maybe this technology can help also in terms of increasing inclusion, in terms of guidance, in terms of tutoring, in terms of coaching, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, great points. I love that we're bringing Clippy back. That's 2 votes for Clippy. So you've got 1 for me. So that's 3. So Asif, I know you had your hand raised. Would you like to add to that?
Absolutely. I think this is a great conversation to have, because when you bring up ethics into this situation, the safety, security, and privacy of the technology that's being developed, I think technology is great, but I'm a trained negotiator. I mediate and I study conflict, right? So that's my other side of me outside of AI. And the reason I do that is because technology is very come and go, right? It's very not so solid, if I may say so, right? Because technology will evolve and technology will disappear, as in technology will improve over time. So technology is just an end point of the user experience, where you have a process in the middle and people on the other side. So, in tech world, we talk about people, process, and technology. I do work on technology, but I focus more on the people, right? How do those people engage with that process so they can develop a technology either for themselves or provide that as a service? So people, process, and technology, the other PowerPoint, right? PPT. So the people side of things, there's lots of conflict will come down the path if we are not managing our expectation about AI machine learning. So if a nonprofit is diving deep into what they want to do, it's not necessarily about delivering a technology. It's about delivering how do we do the process better, right? So if it's people, process, technology, nonprofits, I think the shift should be not to adopt the technology, but adopt the process. And that process is very people-based. So one example I will put out is deepfake, right? If you go down that rabbit holes of understanding the ethics of deepfake and all the things that are going to happen with deepfake, it's just inevitable, first of all, because we really need deepfake. In a spectrum of how bad deepfake can be and versus how useful deepfake can be, we actually have to focus on why we need deepfake, because in the VR world, you will have to utilize deepfake in order to minimize the processing power of a chip, right? In order to say, if I create a deepfake versus giving the actual visualization, and I'll use the Zoom, for example, Mark might be on the other side of the screen here, but that might not be Mark actually, because the amount of processing it takes for Mark to show up from where he's at to my house it's a lot of energy consuming processing, right? So how do we reduce that? So how do we reduce that process by using less electricity and provide that same Zoom experience without really, having Mark be in my monitor as he's in real life? So there's deepfakes that are coming up. They're going to provide these type of services. So for nonprofits to focus on what they focus on and how they focus on that process is to lobby or to provide solutions for us to adopt this process better and faster. And deepfake being that the capabilities to say, like, how do you create an accent? How do you create a visualization of a person that represents you or represents your teacher that you like to learn from, right? So there's lots of ethics behind it, and the deepfake is one of the pieces of concerns that you have to have, but you have to have a wider engagement about it. Deepfake is not just celebrity pictures being depicted as, or a president of the country is saying out the wrong things in a video. Deepfake could be utilized in many ways, but specifically for MR, deepfakes could be that one that somebody poisoned your data set that is providing misinformation, right? Or that you have provided this deepfake with the capability of capturing internal body organs without really using a big camera inside of a body. It's rather a micro camera that is utilizing the deepfake in order to diagnose you with the type of disease that you have. So there's a spectrum to it, and we have to discuss it from the spectrum, because one side of it is all ethics, but the other side of it is a solution.
I love that you brought this topic up, because we know that anything can be good, anything can be bad. The whole question, though, is how it's being used, and you've really focused on that process, which I think is important, because that is what is going to help, as you said earlier, adoption. And I also love that you brought up the people, process, and technology, because that is key to any way to analyze a situation. So with this topic, and I want to be respectful because we are running close to the end of our session. We did have a question. One came in specifically that was around ROI, and I was hoping that we can kind of have a group discussion here, because it seems to be a common topic just around where things are going. We kind of talked about it, that we're at a slow adoption rate right now, but there's been questions that have been raised. That one, I could see, you're going to jump all over this one, but I could see that there's going to be a lot of other panelists that I know are going to feel different feelings about this. But when it comes to the future of whether it's AI, it's XR, there seems to be questions around legality of things. Like, for example, what happens when the #1 song gets written by an AI composer? Who gets credited for that? What happens when some of these deep fakes? I've seen, I think recently, maybe 6 months ago, where someone was represented in court. They had an earpiece in, and AI was their lawyer. So it's what happens in XR when there's Bill, you can probably come up with 3 or 4 situations where there's probably some legal rights there. So is that the next future where things are going, that the legal system needs to catch up with where the technology is? Is it more about just preparing your organization for the process and getting ready there, which I could see, as if you say yes in your mind, you're probably thinking yes, but I'll kind of start since we were there, and we'll kind of double back. But see, where do you see the future of this going with these technologies? Is there something that we should be thinking about top of mind, as we walk away from this discussion and conference today?
Yeah, I think you've always had technology that provides you music, right? Like, as in, a musical instrument, then all of a sudden it's a cassette, right? And a cassette to CD and so on and so forth. But when you have a release a cassette, somebody came up with the blank tapes, and you're able to record in that blank tapes or whatever cassette music you're playing. So, now you can redistribute that music to your friends and families using those blank cassettes, right? And this MP3 solutions that we've seen with iPhone, Steve Jobs, is more like, it's still happening, right? It's happening in different forms. So again, I'll bring up blockchain to provide a solutions to the how to contain a song or a track or an album, so that way that it is being monetized properly and correctly within the legal boundaries. But at the same time, law is always far behind. The policies are always far behind from the technology that is being developed and utilized. We come really like in the late to the game. Say, for example, Napster already did all the damage that they could have done in 2000s, and then the law finally caught up to them, right? But it took them years to caught up to that. So I always look at it as a natural evolution. You only have a local legal policies based on what's popular, right? What's impacting the majority of the population. So that is a natural evolution of things. But as far as the songs and tracks goes, we will have to utilize some sort of blockchain capability to encrypt it, so that way it is being monetized correctly for the artist. Given what we're seeing today with AR, VR, our world that we live in today, the digital world will expand, and all of a sudden in that digital world, you're seeing musics and songs that are just being exchanged openly and freely, and nobody's able to keep track of it because it's happening, say, for example, something like in a Web 3.0, right? You really are not able to track it that often. So I think what will need to happen is that we case it properly, but I guess the far vision of it is that the blockchain encryption is not the greatest in the future, as in encryption is under lots of threats. And one of the things that I would say right now that's happening is that a lot of the encrypted files and documents and songs and legal IP things are being stored in servers for later breaking of this encryption. As in, people will be able to break into those information 10 to maybe 15 years down the road.
Sounds like a time capsule.
Time capsule, exactly. People are storing this information so that way they can audit your history, right? And figure out, like, what did you hide into the encryption. So these encryptions are very vulnerable. And I just want to put that out as a public service announcement, not to freak everybody out, but just to be aware of the encryption is not the solution. So even if I'm saying blockchain, you'll have to find another long-term vision behind it and say, like, well, not necessarily that's a business model that can sustain itself, because the encryptions are really under a lot of threats by machine learning and quantum computing.
Right.
So having said that, you'll always have to look at it from the cassette perspective, right? Well, you had a cassette, somebody stole your music. Well, then you had a CD, but then somebody else stole your CDs, right?
Evolving.
It's always evolving. That's right.
I think that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, with the future, that's the most difficult thing to predict, but you can definitely look at past precedent. And I appreciate, Ralph, you dropping that in there, saying a recent court case said that AI is not copyrightable, but he believes that it's misunderstanding the process caused the ruling, as the judge said, no human was involved, which is equal uncopyrightable, but missed the concept of prompts. So I think there's, once again, as you said, legal is going to take a long time to catch up to this. Enrico, where do you see the future of all these technologies going from your perspective? Is there anything that anyone should be thinking about? I know we gave a lot of tips here where they can start. Is there anything you think that you can foresee or predict that you've seen in a trend in your community?
So yeah, first of all, we will survive. It's not the end of the world. Like usually in our community, that's the idea, like, Terminator in the what Todd was saying at the beginning. I do agree with Bill when he was talking about the kind of convergence between, XR. I mean, this idea of really flexibility and understanding. These are not different technologies. I mean, they are. It is important to differentiate between AR, VR, I mean, all these buzzwords, like Asif was saying, but the future, at least to me, and I also think in education, is really this ability to think about XR as a continuum and really understand that, sometimes we want to work in a specific spot for our students and for our learners, and sometimes we need to move. So that's actually what I think is more exciting to me. And then also what I think is exciting and is happening is also to have students, especially kids, creating XR, which is very common in educational technology. Usually we start as consumers, then teachers start to develop their own solutions, and finally the kids are the one in charge. It's not new. This is usually what happens. So I also think that in XR and education, we will see the same, which is actually pretty exciting. Also, I do hope, but that's more a hope than that really an expectation is really to see more XR editors that everybody can use. That would be really my hope. There have been amazing tools actually years ago that teachers were actually really able to use to really improve their practices. But right now, because of a lot of reasons, they are not there anymore. So the more we can make also the XR production inclusive and open to everybody, the more we'll be able to get, more representation, inclusion, of course, but also more ideas and more, meaningful, I would say, adoption of this technology.
There's that word again, adoption. I love it. Tying it all together. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's been a slow process. Once again, to key on the word process, but I think more and more applications are out there, and I'm glad you brought that perspective in. Vasu, anything to add, I mean, from your perspective in regards to where things are going with these technologies? Any gotchas, any things that the audience should look out for?
I have 2 quick points I'd like to make. One is regarding, I think, something that Asif had mentioned earlier as well. Well, the IPR, right, intellectual property rights and enforcement vary substantially across the world. So I think we will always be slightly behind technology adoption and what the legal implications are. But for sure, we can expect, I'm sure sooner or later, if it's not happened already, crime in the metaverse. Crime is going to happen. How it's going to happen, I'm not very clear. Maybe there's a career there, but there will be something happening there in terms of crime. It can't be ruled out. I don't know if the laws are strong enough. I don't think they are right now. The second point is completely distinct, but nothing to do with technology itself directly, but with regard to ethics and potential mental health issues that could emerge because people might prefer life in the metaverse than real life. I don't know whether that's appropriate to talk about right now, but I'm just raising this as something, as it is, people have thought and do see their social media identity as being more glamorous than their own reality, so to say. And therefore, I wouldn't be surprised if that will be the next level where people lose the sense of identity and prefer, hanging out in the metaverse. So it's just something to think about. I mean, I may be totally wrong, but since you asked, I'm just raising these 2 points. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those are really important. And we already know with the rising cognitive disabilities that we've seen worldwide, that being in front of a machine virtually has some type of impact. They can't 100% connect it, but there definitely has been studies that have shown that is some type of impact. So with that, it totally makes sense that with these technologies, you could definitely go down some paths. And I know, Enrico, you've talked a couple times that you can easily become addicted with these things, and that adds obviously to your mental health. So it makes sense. Bill, anything, I mean, you are on the forefront of this. You've been in this, you mentioned 2015, you went down this route. So you've seen this evolve. What are you seeing from your perspective? Is it everything that we talked about here? Is there anything else to add that we should be thinking about that hasn't been mentioned?
I think it comes down to culmination of what everyone just sort of summarized, which is becoming good stewards of this technology from a digital citizenship standpoint, right? And part of that is what Enrico's doing, Asif, Vasu, Yulia, like everyone on this call, we are educating people on the possibilities of this technology. That's why we're here today, right? We're here to talk through things, get inspired, question. It's great to hear all these different perspectives, especially even cybersecurity, right? As it relates to metaverse. Like these are trends these are problems that aren't going away. I mean, Asif even did like the #1 thing that I hate to do on calls, which is bring up the word deepfake. Like that's a really hard thing to talk about, but he like masterfully and succinctly like talked through it. And now I want to go learn more about deepfakes for good, right? That word's always been socialized as like a bad term, but now all of a sudden it's like, all right, I get it. Like it's time to go educate and level up even further. So that's the hope that I try to bestow upon people that I work with, specifically in nonprofits, I think my PowerPoint was very clear that, you know, it's a give back first attitude. Let's inspire the next generation of learners of all ages to want to grab this technology, code, figure it out, and try to make the world a little bit of a better place as a result of that knowledge and share it with others.
Yeah, I love that give back mentality. It definitely was shot through very well through your presentation. So I appreciate that, Bill. And Yulia, I know I talked about a lot today, and you kicked it off with the presentation, and we've had all these conversations about, you know, as Bill said, we even brought up some of the buzzwords that make most people cringe. But from you, where do you see this going, and are there any final closure or tips that you would give to the attendees or even our panelists that we should be thinking about that we haven't had a chance to really touch on subjects, or anything that you would highly recommend?
Sure. So there are actually two quotes that I wanted to end with that I kind of cut out because I wanted to make sure Bill had a chance to talk. But one of them is, there is not a crowd. There's no crowd on the leading edge. So, you know, sometimes when we're kind of pushing the bounds of these kind of technologies, it does feel a little lonely. That you're kind of trudging forth and you're, you know, breaking new ground, and it's, you know, you're facing resistance and you're facing questions and all this kind of stuff. So I just want to kind of put it out there that, you have supporters here, and that every time there's a, technology shift, this is just kind of a normal part of the process. So just, hang in there and sort of like really, don't get discouraged by any kind of resistance you're getting, because there are easy ways to get started, to start experimenting, so that when the sort of the mainstream wave hits you, you're practicing surfing now, so that when that wave comes, you can kind of ride the top of the wave versus, getting crushed by it. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that with these AI tools, you now have essentially everything you need to create anything you want. Now, of course, there's that deep fake component. There's that, there's a lot of bad that can happen for that. But if you do point it toward good, I mean, it's incredible the productivity that you're able to get. Like I was just talking to somebody who was saying now, our brand teams, they can, instead of putting out, 5 creative concepts, like each person can put out, 50 just by themselves. So try to find those positive ways that you can get those productivity lifts, because this is going to become table stakes in the future, and like these kind of tools. And if you're already experimenting with them today, then you're going to have that leg up and be able to ride the wave. So I'll just end with that.
Thank you so much, everyone. If we can give a nice big round of applause to all of our panelists, our presenters today. I have so much to think about, which is the point of this conference, is once again to inspire. Bill, I think you hit it on the head, that's why we're here. I mean, we wanted to really get people to think about this, because it is top of the discussion point. But as you said, Yulia, it is going to lay out to be table stakes. I mean, this is something that you have to start planning for and thinking about, because if you don't, as you said, that tidal wave is coming. Todd, wanted to flip it over to you. I know we've got some the giveaway we're going to do to a random participants, so we'll be doing that definitely. So look for that. Wanted to thank once again. That is going out to our partner Kent Displays, and thanks for them. And we also, once again, wanted to we're going to do a quick message, but Todd, did you have any final thoughts about the panel before we jump into a message from our sponsor, which I know is near to dear to you, which is part of the nonprofit connection here?
Definitely. Well, thank you, Mark. And I don't think there's a word big enough for thank you for Yulia, Bill, Asif, Vasu, and Enrico for creating an extremely dynamic, exciting, and broad-ranging conversation about AI and XR for a better world. I think for myself, and I believe for all our attendees, we've seen a whole wide array of opportunities that we can leverage this technology, as well as some very solid cautions on understanding how each one of us can, for ourselves, for our organizations, and for our world, build out relevant, successful, empowering AI and XR solutions. And what I come back to, when I was talking about the goal to create a Hamish show, welcoming space, I think we've done it here today. I think we've outlined some ways to do that in these environments that we've talked about creating for schools, for nonprofits, hospitals, for people collecting histories of culture, music, supporting their local cities, and collaborating across the world. What I take to heart is the idea of an empathy machine. That concept that was introduced by the keynote speakers, reinforced by our panelists, how we can leverage this empathy to really drive this wave that we are riding, right? As we talk about surfing the internet, if I'm going to mix some metaphors, how we do this with empathy, to be listening, to be aware of what's happening, to welcome a variety of perspectives, to disagree civilly, and to build these solutions together, I think, gives me hope that the purpose of what we've been trying to do with Better World Day can be successful. So I hope all as panelists, as attendees, you take away some great insights, some next steps. We'll be providing some resources after today's event. Please follow us on LinkedIn to keep updated on what we're doing. We'll post this recording, have some other resources and so forth available. And we urge you to continue the conversation. Talk with others, share some of these ideas, and continue this great work. And so I think the video that Mark's teed up to conclude is video that we developed here at Workman Circle around a way to, we posted it online a few years ago. It ended up being our most popular followed video, liked video. And so not that we need to be liked, but we wanted to kind of share with it as a neat way to wrap things up and provide some folks some ideas on how to inspire a community based in Cleveland that we're more than just chopped liver, I should say. So with that, thank you.
In the heart of Cleveland's East Side, 3 chefs competing to hold the crown for the best chopped liver.
Look at this. Whoa. Look at this. That's beautiful. Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Here, Al.
Your liver's popping and smacking me in the face.
Sorry, that was part of the technique.
Your onions are burning. Oh my God, they burned.
Each will be given the same amount of time and will be tasked with using their secrets to make their dish rank higher than the rest.
Well, you've dealt with me many times.
You gotta salt the onions when you saute them. It's such an important part.
Laurie Kahan Simon, Matt Greminger,
did you hear that? Hey, this looks like a kidney.
and celebrity chef Doug Katz.
The knives are in my roll right here. You just unroll.
Head to head in chopped liver.
Love it. Very nice. Well, once again, we wanted to thank you for coming out today to Better World Day. And we thank you for coming. Once again, as Todd said, feel free to follow us on X now, Better World Day. Check out our site. And we wanted to thank you for attending. Todd, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job.
Everybody. Thank you.
Have a good one. All right, Todd, that's a wrap.
Okay, you want to turn off the recording?
Yes, sir.